Ain't T to the G, man. Who you think it gonna be? And on today's episode of Who Is, we jump straight into the story of Jeff Pelley, the boy accused and convicted of killing his whole family because his father said no to going to the prom.
Jeff Pelley, a 17-year-old who allegedly murdered his entire family in cold blood and went to prom right after the incident. Although the evidence against Jeff Pelley was eventually lacking, including forensic evidence, the murder weapon, and witnesses who may have linked him to the crime, Pelley was found guilty in a trial that took place 17 years after the incident. So, are you ready to know more about him? Well, in this video, we'll share with you the untold story of this boy who killed everyone just for this. On April 30, 1989, parishioners of the Olive Branch Church waited anxiously for their service to begin, but their Reverend Robert P did not appear. Even members of his family were not present at the church. After visiting next door to check on the family, churchgoers discovered the pastor, his wife, and their 2 kids lying in a pool of blood inside their home. All 4 had just been shot. The disappearance of the Reverend's allegedly troublesome son, Jeff Pelley, who was 17 years old, was reported by the Indiana State Police as soon as it occurred. The young man had been arrested for a burglary only a few short weeks previously, and as a consequence, his father had forbade him from attending the senior prom. This seemed to the police like a possible explanation for why the crime was committed, and Jeff Pelley quickly became their prime suspect. The following day, the cops found him at an amusement park and learned that the night before, he had dressed to the nines for prom with his pals and then partied irresponsibly with them. It was finally determined that he was responsible for the deaths of 4 members of his family, and he was found guilty of the crimes. Nevertheless, there is still some debate as to whether or not he had committed them. This is the upsetting tale that he told. Robert Jeffrey Pelley, who was born on December 10, 1971, comes from a very devout family. The 1960s saw his father and mother, Ava, meeting each other for the first time at Mount Vernon Nazarene University in Ohio. They were married in 1970, and Pelley was born in the following year in 1971. 1976 was the year when his youngest sister, Jacques, entered the world. In 1980, although his father's religion was the center of his life, the guy was successful in landing a job programming computers. Because of the chance, they found themselves in Cape Coral, Florida, which is where Ava Pelley received the news that she had skin cancer in 1984. After declining medical care, she passed away in February of the following year. Within a few short months, Robert Pelley became acquainted with Dawn Huber. The 27-year-old woman had only just experienced the loss of a husband herself, and the 2 widowers fell in love with one another very fast, because they were married so quickly in November 1985. Jeff and Jacques were forced to meet their new stepsisters shortly after the wedding. In 1986, the newly formed Pelley family relocated to Lakeville, Indiana. At the time of their arrival, Jessica was 5 years old, Janelle was 4 years old, and Jolene was only 2 years old. Huber's other 3 kids were Janelle, Jessica, and Jolene, while Robert Pelley was serving as the pastor of the Olive Branch Church, which had a congregation of up to 50 people. Conditions at home were far less tranquil. Mark Center, a detective with the Indiana State Police, observed, "I know there was a lot of animosity in that family between him and his dad, between Bob and Jeff. I'm aware of the circumstance in which Bob hit him once. I believe that a lot of the same stuff was seen by the neighbors as well." Despite this, the Pelley family had a peaceful existence at the parsonage that was located right next door to the church until the beginning of 1989, when Jeff Pelley was taken into custody for the theft of CDs and cash from a neighboring residence. Center had been involved with the investigation personally. According to Center, Bob Pelley put Jeff on an administrative leave for the burglary case. Pelley's prom was a 2-day event that began with a customary dance on Saturday, April 29, and concluded with a school-sponsored expedition to the Great America Amusement Park on Sunday, April 30. This was a significant event for Pelley, whose prom was a 2-day affair. Center postulated that Pelley was crushed when his father disallowed him from going, and that this led to Pelley's violent attitude to the situation as a result. Center said that Jeff Pelley had only gone to the prom after he had already murdered his biological father, stepmother, and 2 of his stepsisters. David Hathaway, a member of the congregation, was the one who stumbled into the murder scene after the pastor's absence from the Sunday service at 9:30 in the morning. Hathaway looked about for a key and entered the building when his knocking remained unanswered. After finding the pastor's spectacles on the ground, he subsequently found the body of the pastor. Dawn Pelley was discovered dead by the local police, embracing both of her deceased children. Center reflected on the events of that morning and said, "No one should have witnessed what we saw. It didn't seem to be a burglary at all. It did not appear like a home invasion. That morning, I was a detective, so I witnessed the worst of the worst, but we had to keep moving on with the investigation. Therefore, we quickly began discussing possible culprits. Since Jacques, Jessica, and Jeff Pelley all managed to escape the carnage, the detectives verified their alibi. While Jessica stayed the night at her friend's house for a sleepover, Jacques had traveled out of town to see a college acquaintance. However, Jeff had been in town the whole time, and he was visibly upset with his father. Center came to the following conclusion. I assume he murdered his family and then was allowed to go to the prom. After finding Jeff Pelley at the amusement park on April 30, the maddening investigation police interrogated him at the station while he was accompanied by his grandparents. The interrogation took place on April 30. When questioned about his stepmother, he responded as follows. We didn't get along pretty well. I suppose we exchanged pleasantries like hello and goodbye, but other than that, we never actually conversed with one another about anything else. I don't mean that I disliked her or anything like that, but the two of us just tolerated one another. However, since there was neither a murder weapon, nor any forensic evidence, nor any eyewitnesses, the case against Pelley was fairly weak. A sequence of events and circumstantial evidence were the only two pieces of evidence that the St. Joseph County detective, John Bodick, used in his investigation. He said that quite a few individuals had visited the Pelley residence on Saturday, and that they had stayed until 5 p.m. to display their prom attire. After then, there were no more guests in the home, and by 5:30, Jeff Pelley's 1984 gray Ford Mustang had already been taken away. According to Frank Schaefer, an assistant district attorney for St. Joseph's County, there was a very, very tiny window when the family might have been killed, and it was very evident that the only person who could have done this was Jeff. This statement was made by Mr. Schaffer. The idea that Schaffer proposed went as follows. After using the shotgun that belonged to the family to murder the 4 people, Pelley concealed the gun and the shells that it contained. After that, he cleaned his trousers, got a shower, got dressed, and then went to the home of a buddy to pick up his girlfriend for the prom. But up until the year 2002, there just wasn't enough evidence to prosecute him with anything. At the time that he was accused of the prom night killings, Jeff Pelley had just started a family. He resided in Florida and he worked as a consultant for IBM. Yet, he was now facing allegations of 4 separate murders. His trial started in 2006, and the prosecution has been depending on the chronology they created in 1989 ever since it began. The defense team thought that was a ridiculous argument. The individuals who were with Jeff that night characterized him as simply one of the group, and they were having a wonderful time, according to the defense counsel, Alan Baum. From all indications, the folks who were with Jeff that night portrayed him as just one of the group. It seems so ludicrous to believe that he could have spent the whole evening doing all that they did and having fun like a child after having just murdered his family. Yet the thought persists. In 2006, a jury convicted Pelley guilty of all charges, and he was given a sentence of 160 years in prison. When the Indiana Supreme Court affirmed in 2009, Pelley's conviction was finalized in 2009. A few years later, however, Frances Watson of the McKinney Wrongful Conviction Clinic submitted a post-conviction relief application on the defendant's behalf. Her argument for a new trial was based on the results of a luminol test that was conducted in 1989 on the cylinder of Pelley's washing machine. This test, however, had not determined whether there had been blood or even laundry detergent in the machine on the day in question to demonstrate whether he attempted to clean his bloodied clothes. She said that the accusation that Pelley had cleaned his pants had unfairly affected the jurors who heard the case against him because of this. In addition, a peculiar transcript was never submitted as part of the evidence. In 2003, prosecutors interviewed a lady whose name was Toni Beeler. During the interview, she discussed Robert Pelley's questionable financial activities in the state of Florida. She said that he was terrified of being killed by his customers, who she did not identify. However, more material on this claim has not yet been uncovered. As of right now, Jeff Pelley is still doing time in prison.
Man, first off, I want to say that the whole story itself is sad and tragic. Do I think he did the crime? Absolutely. Absolutely. Kids, for some reason, don't actually have the foresight and the thought to think 5-10 years in the future. They just think about right now. And I think that maybe he just lost his mind and wanted to go to the prom. It's an open shut case. There is some things that are open for discussion and debate. That's why his lawyer, the appeal overturned. But at the end of the day, the evidence is insurmountable. His father might have had a few enemies, but as far as I can tell, man, the case seems pretty open and shut. But I wasn't there. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about the whole story and the situation itself for Jeff Pelley. And like I said, there's 10 other streamers out here doing it, but
fuck that, I looked in. I'm maxed out.